We're back with Northwestern Outdoors Radio. I'm John Cruz. It's story time. We are going to tell you a hunting story. And the narrator of this story is Jeff Holmes. He is an outdoors writer. He's based in Pasco, Washington, which, by the way, is home of one of our affiliates, KONA AM 610. They've been carrying our show for years. Jeff, it's great to have you on the air.
Great to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
So, Jeff, I want to talk about that beautiful 6x6 bull elk you tagged out on this month in the Blue Mountains. I saw that on Facebook right after you posted it, reached out to you immediately. It's like, I've got to share your story on the air. So we're going to do this. We'll call it a hunt in 3 acts. We'll start at the very beginning, in terms of the work that went into getting the tag for this hunt. Then we'll go to the hunt itself, and then we'll talk about the final day. So let's start off with Act 1, getting the tag for this elk and all the pre-hunt preparation you did.
Sure. The tag I got was not an easy tag to get, and I got kind of lucky drawing it. I only had 13 points in Washington's preference system. Only one muzzleloader, any bull tag is given out in the very large unit that I hunted in, which is the Lick Creek unit, the Blue Mountains. You know, there aren't a lot of big bull tags in the Blues, but Lick Creek has, I think, the fewest that are given out, even though it's a giant chunk of property. You know, I've been applying, even though I'm really not a diehard elk hunter. I mean, I elk hunt, but it's not a family tradition for me. Like you, John, I'm way more of a bird hunter. In fact, my friends during the hunt, I think, were kind of frustrated or at least amused that I was more fixated on blue grouse at times than on elk hunting. I'm also a pretty hardcore deer hunter, but, you know, this is the first time I've had a really primo elk tag. So I took it pretty seriously. Had a couple of setbacks. First one was that when I drew the tag, and what we find out about our special hunts in Washington in June, I think a lot of states find out earlier, I was not in great shape. Oh, not that I am at the moment either, but I was in shape that was not consistent with walking around for days and days and hauling out, 400 pounds of meat.
Right.
So I went on a diet as soon as I drew that tag from WDFW, and that went well. I ended up dropping like 47 pounds before season.
Nice.
But I broke my ribs.
No.
Before season, which made some of my training more difficult. So my hunt ended up being kind of a crash course fitness, kind of like a double days football in high school. But it ended up working out pretty well. I got up in the mountains and scouted a few times for sure. I'd already stomped all over that game management unit, bluegrass hunting from the time I was 11 till I'm 43 now, so quite a while. So I already had an idea of the lay of the land, but I'd never been chasing elk up there before. I usually do that in the thick wolf-infested forest of northeast Washington. So this was different. There aren't, as yet, I'm sure they walk in there, but there isn't a wolf pack in Lick Creek that I know of. So it ended up being a pretty special hunt where just the elk weren't pressured a whole lot, and some of the biggest challenges I faced were my own fitness and the fact that they were burning slash piles, incredible numbers of slash piles with flames licking as high as 50 feet tall.
Oh my gosh!
And we actually saw that affect the elk behavior.
Well, before we get into the hunt itself, I want to talk about something else. You had mentioned before we went on the air that the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, they kind of helped you out with this hunt. I mean, clearly they helped you out in terms of you were lucky enough to draw the tag, but beyond that, what did our state wildlife agency do for you?
Yeah, I think WDFW, they're not perfect, and they definitely, I've got my criticisms, as we all do, but knowing a lot of folks in the department and having briefly worked for them, actually at one point in the director's office, I've got some compassion for them, and I think they do a lot right that we don't hear about. In 1989, when they did their post-hunt surveys of the Blue Mountains elk herds, the mature bull to cow ratio was down to something like 2 to 4 mature bulls per 100 cows across all of what are now the spike-only GMUs.
Right, that's awful.
That's as bad as I think it gets. So they instituted that spike-only regulation, which engendered a lot of bad blood just because of the lack of understanding of what they were doing. And DFW has a lot of constraints and aren't always great at explaining to the public why they're making tough decisions. And I think a lot of rumors erupt from that. But what has happened, and I know this because I wrote, my editor at Northwest Sportsman magazine, Andy Walgamot, several years ago asked me to write kind of a comprehensive elk hunting piece about the Blues. So I researched the heck out of it with every bio I could talk to. And pretty amazing what's happened there, the transformation in the structure of the elk herd. Now at the end of hunting seasons, when they do their post-hunt surveys, there's 18 to 24 mature bulls per 100 cows left in the Blues.
Wow.
That's amazing, right? Frustrates some people.
That is quite the comeback. All right, let's get into Act 2, the hunt itself. You've already described this post-apocalyptic sort of scenery with slash burns burning everywhere.
Yeah.
What else was going on in the Blue Mountains when you went hunting there at the end of September?
Well, I got super lucky and got really cold weather. You know, I live in Tri-Cities. It's probably the warmest place here in the Northwest, and pretty worried about being out there and not having a lot of support and shooting an animal far from the road and having game wastage. So I was going to limit my hunting to pretty close to the road, but a couple of really awesome things happened. First, got a major cold snap. All the mountains in the west got hammered. I know, like the eastern front of the Rockies in places got 4 feet of snow. We didn't get 4 feet of snow, but we had, 2 to 4, maybe 5 inches across most of where I was hunting, most of the time that I was hunting. That was awesome. And then the second really important thing that happened for me is I had a couple of friends step up to come with me on the hunt. I was literally the only tag holder. Most of my friends are fishing guides, or they're archery hunters, or they're muzzleloaders like me, and they were either on hunts, going on hunts, or taking people fishing. So I was pretty worried I was going to be alone. But Bryce Doherty, Boardman, Oregon, O'Doherty Outfitters, who's a pretty well-known fishing guide and a heck of a guy. He loves to elk hunt. He's probably just as good a hunter as he is a fisherman, and he's a great fisherman. But he tells me he doesn't ever want to guide hunting because he doesn't want to take all the fun out of it because he's so passionate about it. And I really found that to be true. A friend of mine, too, I hadn't seen since grade school, came up as well. So he and I and Bryce were kind of a team.
Well, we've got about 1.5 minutes left. Tell me about the connection with this huge 6x6 bull.
Sure. So day 5 of hiking in the mountains, day 4 of season, and night 3 we had glassed some really giant bulls on some finger ridges that had moved out of heavy timber to feed in some really lush grass on some WDFW property. And we decided, okay, let's stop hunting around those slash piles where we're seeing, diminishing numbers of elk, whereas we had seen them a couple days before they were lit. And let's go down an elevation and hunt these finger ridges. So Bryce and I got out there in the dark and started walking down a ridge, listening for bugles. He's a master bugler. And, after a while, we heard some bugles start to erupt in deep canyons all around us.
Wow.
And, the bulls that we'd seen the night before, it was pretty dark, but they were, if you know anything about the Blue Mountains elk herd, we've got 400-inch elk here. And I'm not going to say we saw 400-inch elk, but we saw giant elk, like the kind that you would see in Yellowstone before the wolves nuked them.
Right.
So we were pretty excited. We had an elk bugle really close to us, probably quarter mile, slightly more. So we dropped down into some timber, played the wind, made a setup where, we had the bull coming, and he was bugling his heart out, roaring at us. We were just cow calling, and Bryce was doing the calling at that point. I snuck down, got in position behind a small tree, kind of trying to intercept where the bull was going to pop out. Bryce was behind me about 80 yards, calling in some dark timber. And when I saw that bull approaching, at first he was jogging, and then he was running to the point where he was almost at a full run.
Wow.
I watched him crash through some small ponderosa pines that were too thick to get his big antlers through. He ripped off a bunch of branches.
Oh, my gosh.
And he emerged broadside, quartering toward me at what seemed like incredibly close range. I once shot a bear at 12 yards that I called in. That's the closest thing I've ever shot other than birds. This guy was not much further out than that. I think we paced it off at about 18 yards afterwards, but he quartered to me. I fired, blew a 300 grain, all brass, no lead, machined bullet right through his shoulder and out both lungs. He wheeled around, kicked up a bunch of dirt, ran about 60 yards, and laid down, which I thought was a pretty good sign. But not being a seasoned elk hunter, I just hunkered down and waited for Bryce. We waited about 20 minutes, walked up there, and he was stone dead and beautiful. Nice, big, mature 6x6, 370 pounds of meat to the butcher, beautiful swept-back main beams. Not the biggest bull in the blues by any means, but a big, nice, mature 6x6 with extraordinarily white ivory-tipped antlers, because I think he spends a lot of time kind of in the open there on that WDFW property.
Incredible hunting story told in 3 acts by Jeff Holmes. And folks, I can guarantee you're going to be reading about this sooner than later. Is this going to be in Northwest Sportsman or somewhere else, Jeff?
It's definitely going to be somewhere for sure. And, John, if you don't mind, can I just give it a shout-out to a couple of people who helped me on the hunt? They're not sponsors or anything, but it really matters to me. First, I'd just like to give a plug for Randy Newberg's show. If you haven't seen Fresh Tracks, Randy Newberg's an all public lands elk hunter, and I drew a lot of inspiration in my weight loss journey from Randy, watching all the hills that he was humping up and down. And I've never had nice binoculars either, so I blew some coin on Vortex, which I found to be a lot more affordable than other binoculars on the market, and they really made my hunt. They were huge. Finally, Beetles to Bones, which, you've got a lot of listeners here in Tri-Cities, and I don't think a lot of people know this guy exists, but David Winden lives out in Badger Canyon here in Tri-Cities, and he has those cool beetles that, eat the brains and the meat around your skulls to make European mounts, and he does it for really cheap. So I'd recommend looking him up.
All right. Beetles to Bones, that's the company there. And you heard the other shout-outs too. We have got to go, Jeff, but congratulations on taking a beautiful bull elk and sharing the story with us here today on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thanks for letting me talk about it.